but tell us about it. And, more importantly, if you default on a loan, surely you could be insured up to a level, so that if you lose your job or whatever, you could continue to pay it back. Or, surely you could, in fact, as party to the agreement with the special purpose vehicle, to the securitization scheme, possibly re-securitize it, and then keep your house. The options to the consumer are huge. Where are those options? We don't even know this exists. Yet they're still going into court, and somehow they're still managing to get these judgments. Again, I'd like to talk a bit more of that in the second session. Okay, so
Excuse me, Scott.
Yeah.
Why are they so interested in money if it doesn't exist and they could create more?
Why
do they worry about going back to broke?
Yeah, they're basically saying why if bank money doesn't exist, why are they carrying on with this? It's agreed. It's fake money for real assets. It's control.
They're buying your future.
Honestly, yeah, they do. Honestly, it's a system. It's a geometric system that's just got a life of its own, and that's perpetually we're going. Sorry, you've been wanting to ask a question, and then. That's a fair point, and yeah, no, that's a fair point. There's a big debate whether money is real or not. I really don't want to go into that. I think that's each person's for themselves. I just want to tell you our research, and then you can decide for yourself. The fact that we believe in it and we use it makes it real. There was one more question, then I want to carry on.
I'm just playing a bit of devil's advocate here. In a sense, we want things, so we go get a loan. But isn't the onus also on us that we're actually playing the game with them?
Yeah.
We're actually saying, cool, we really want the money because we want things. At the same time, instead of saving for that.
Yes.
Now, what is really the end game of everything, all your research? Is it to sort of create free money for everybody in the world, or is it to create a completely different economy?
The answer to your question is transparency. That's what I want. I want to know what's going on. I want them to disclose what's going on. And I don't want them to keep using the section, especially Section 33 of the Reserve Bank Act, which says we don't have to disclose anything. We don't have to disclose. It's a complete secret. Sorry, last question there, and then I need to keep going.
Are you going to bring in the government's role in this, which shows this competition? We end up underwriting each other. The government bails out these guys.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, no, you're right. Yeah, you're talking about TARP in America now. Yeah. Well, I'm actually going to start talking about that just now, because the international side gets important. So definitely, it's a long. Hope your bum's not too sore, guys. I know that you guys are feeling it. You need to go like really badly. Can I just finish on this section? Let me finish this section, then we'll have a quick toilet break. Okay, guys. And I appreciate it. I know that it's getting hard, but on your backsides. But we're almost there in this session. Okay. Right. So I said, transfer must totally divest the originator from all rights and obligations and from all risks and rewards. Absolute cession divests the cedent, originator, that's the bank, from, in most cases, from all rights and vests them with a cessionary, special purpose entity. The special purpose entity, or SPV, special purpose vehicles, are who they sell the loans to, bundle them up, and then they are then traded again after that. Okay. So it vests them with a cessionary to the extent that only the cessionary is entitled to sue for the enforcement of rights. It means that Standard Bank, Nedbank, Absa, etc. cannot go to court and sue for the enforcement of the rights if it's been securitized. Now this caused chaos. There was a multi-billion-dollar lawsuit that American people won. They didn't actually win it. They actually lost it, because even though they won, they all got like $500 or something for losing their houses. It wasn't a victory. It proved that they were right, but they didn't really get compensation. There's been several court cases that show this. There was a brilliant court case in Hawaii just a few months ago. There's been a court case in the UK, and there was somewhere else as well. So this is not new. This is not new to South Africa. There have been court cases that have been won. So a securitization with which assets are transferred by the originator to an SPE, special purpose entity, special purpose vehicle, same thing, through assignment, effectively divests itself from all the rights and all the obligations enjoyed in an underlying agreement with a borrower. I'll read that again. A securitization with which assets are transferred by the originator to an SPE through assignment effectively divests itself from all rights and obligations enjoyed in an underlying agreement with a borrower. The agreement with the borrower. Gone. They've lost those rights. How many foreclosures and assets have been stripped because of this? Now, the counter-argument still appears. Well, you can't not pay your loan now because you still did actually borrow it. And that's what the judge will say. The judge turns around and goes, did you get a house? And you go, yes, but. Well then, shut up. You signed a security. What's the point? Not listening to anything else.
Hang on. If the bank sues you for not paying your money, they are saying they still owe them. You still owe them the money, that they are the legitimate owners.
Yes.
The fact that your house or your loan hasn't been ceded or sold.
Yes.
So how do you know
Whether your loan has been
exactly,
securitized.
Exactly.
That's why we're here today. That's ultimately what it is. We want transparency. You cannot find out whether or not your loan has been ceded or securitized. It's impossible. We've tried as many angles as we can. They will not reveal that information. My question is why? If there's nothing wrong with it and it benefits all of us, why not tell us about it? Because we know it's going on. You can see it in the motion court. Somebody must be finding out because these special purpose entities like Blue Granite are suing in court for foreclosure. So now they've cottoned on over the last couple of months. So somebody knows what's going on. But we don't.
But again, let's say Blue Granite sues me.
Yeah?
I haven't got an agreement with Blue Granite.
Yeah.
So they're not going to win their case.
Technically, no. What we find in the past is the Blue Granite goes up to court and the judge says, show me the session. They bring the session. So the session is with Standard Bank. I agree to cede the loan. There it's done. Go. House is gone. That's how they're winning at the moment. And the reason for it is there's no counter-argument. Nobody's fighting securitization battles in court because nobody understands how it works. This argument is difficult to put forward. Remember, our law, and I really wanted to go get into this in the second session, our law says that the agreement is king. That's it. The agreement is king. Nothing can stop the agreement, and we need to break that shield. But can I get into that more later? It will be answered over time.
But if all of the loans get put into a pool, how do you know which loans are in there?
It's the fish pond. That's the fish pond argument. It's the fresh water in the fish pond. But what they can do is they can take a glass, they can put it into the pool, and they can bring it to court going, oh, look, here's a loan, and here's an agreement. Here's a securitized, whatever, it must be here. And no one challenges it. And because you can't prove it, the bank, because they go back to the original contract or the original agreement, that's still enough to win in court. This is why we're suing them, because we have to change this.
Look, I understand where you're coming from, but those people who have been foreclosed, they haven't got the money. They've stopped paying their loans. So they're not going to argue if you ever sues them.
Yeah. It's a beautiful model for the banks. The people who they're screwing, excuse the term, but that's really what's happened, the people who they're taking for a ride are the very people that can't afford to sue them. And it even says in the agreement, if you do sue me, whether you win or lose, you're paying for the costs. So there's 100 grand already. Can I finish off before we go, guys? Sorry, and then we'll get back into this. Okay, in the South African Reserve Bank's own words, in a document called Note on the Impact of Securitization Transactions on Credit Extensions by Banks. See, credit extension. I love it. What is a credit extension? They don't even use the word loan anymore. Note on the impact of securitization transactions on credit extension by banks. Under a traditional securitization scheme, a true sale takes place, and all rights and obligations are transferred to the SPV, which is a special purpose vehicle. And in the United States, where the concept of securitization started, a bank must be able to prove that it actually owns a mortgage before it begins to foreclose. We've confirmed now that's the same here. If they can't do this, they can't foreclose. This was made clear in a special case of SEMA Schwartz versus HomeQ Servicing, where it says the fact that it had possession of the mortgage instrument did not render Deutsche Bank, the mortgagee, and thus it lacked the power to sell the property. There was a well-known case where a guy actually fought and won after his property had been foreclosed because the mortgage wasn't transferred properly. Because there's so much greed going on, they're not transferring the asset. Now, remember we talked about the promissory note? The promise to pay that's been separated? That's what they sell. This physical paper needs to be transferred properly. In America, they actually have to turn it on the back and they have to say, endorse it. Endorse it. Remember when you used to endorse a check? Remember, they have to do that because it's an instrument. A check is a negotiable instrument. A promissory note is a negotiable instrument. They endorsed it on the back and they have to actually transfer that piece of paper because the physical piece of paper is the asset. They weren't doing that properly, which means pieces of paper were all over the place. No one knew who owned them. So these guys were, these guys can sell, on these markets. I mean, in these stock exchanges, these merchant bankers and stuff. They're on that phone and they're selling it all over the place. please watch a movie called Margin Call. Watch a movie called Margin Call. It shows how they flogged toxic assets because they were selling loans that were going to go bang. And they sold them to places like Greece and other places, including little, what do you call them? Little American towns. What do you call them? The people that run the towns, the city councils. Yeah, in America they're called the town councils. There's another name for them. Anyway, they were selling them to these guys who are now totally bankrupt. Entire villages and town and areas are bankrupt because they bought these toxic assets. And but again, we're going to talk about the international stuff just now. Just to finish off on securitization. Going to go back to Advocate Blackbeard from the Registrar of Banks. This is a letter that he wrote to our organization, to the New Economic Rights Alliance, where he says, when transferring assets to an SPV, a bank transfers its full ownership to such SPV and has no legal standing in respect of the assets thereafter.
How can we know that they've done that, though? Do they always do that?
That's the thing. They don't always do it. It's a lot. I mean, it's almost like you can see it on a macro level. You can see the numbers that they're using. We've got huge documents that show billions and billions that are being transferred and all that it's happening. But to actually find it on a micro level where your asset has been, very difficult to find. But now we know why. Because it's going to expose their whole little secret.
Scott?
Okay.
In terms of the deeds office, when you buy a house and get a loan, the loan is registered against your deed at the deeds office.
That's correct, yeah.
Surely then, when the bank sells it on, it should then register it at the deeds office and state to whom it's been sold.
You're correct. 2 points. First of all, that hardly ever happens because the paperwork doesn't get done properly. Number two is our research on the South African Securitization Forum, SASF, of which all the banks now mysteriously have become members in the last couple of months since we started causing issues. According to them, it does not have to happen. They don't have to put it on the title deed.
But if you want to get a deed, if you want to change the property, say consolidate or subdivide that property, you go to the bank if they're the holder of the deed, and you can get the deed from the bank. It's however long that property was.
I'm willing to bet that it won't be. They won't have done that paperwork correctly.
But surely that's breaking the law because they now are holding the deed or they're holding your deed where they don't actually own the asset anymore.
Yeah. But you see, the thing is, this is where it gets interesting. If they're not selling the deed, they're selling the rights to the deed. So they beautifully put just now, what's the difference? And that's actually what it is. So you're sitting in your house and you've got your title deed and it's fully paid off, but the rights were sold in some agreement you did 20 years ago. Suddenly what happens if this thing starts falling, they technically have rights to your assets. That is going to cause major trouble. Now remember guys, that what we're doing now is we've got a whole legal team on this who's been digging huge amounts of information up onto with regards. There's a lot more going on behind the scenes than we think there is. Did you want to make a comment?
When you pay off your loan, cancel your bond. Your title deed is then endorsed, bond cancelled, and you get it back. You can tell me anybody, no one else can come in and say, oh, sorry, I own your house.
Theoretically, I agree with you. That's what I was always believed in. However, it's not looking quite as safe. Because remember, it goes back to an agreement. If there was a prior agreement with that says you've agreed to let the rights go.
It's cancelled.
But remember that what's cancelled? Left agreement or right agreement?
There's also time. If you're talking about things like prescription.
I can tell you now that the courts haven't even been listening to prescription lately. It's been so bad. Look, I don't want to go into a debate in terms of. I can show you cases where old debts are being sold off and they're managing to pull this off. It's not a rosy courts following justice that we think they are. The guys have been rubber stamping. I know it's improving now a little bit. And I know they're not supposed to. Technically speaking, what you say is correct. But remember, those original agreements basically give the bank the right to do whatever they want. They don't even have to notify you. They can alter the agreement that you signed stuff that there's agreements that could be existing several times over in the derivatives market. You don't even know they exist. But theoretically, it is possible that if your loan has been paid off and you get your title deed, that some resemblance of an old agreement still remains, and that special purpose entity still has rights to your asset. We can go into, again, I don't want to go into too much detail on that. That's my research, so we can all research it for ourselves.
Is it possible that New Granite might be an entity that belongs to one of the banks? It might be one of their,
They often,
subsidiary or
from what we've heard of banks are also on shareholder. Guys, the laws that have been broken are...
trading.
Hey?
Isn't that insider
That's just part of the course. That's only the start. Remember, guys, it says the Bank Act says they can't even engage in securitization. So if they're breaking that, who cares about the rest of it? But basically what it comes down to, remember, agreement is king. So, all they need to do, let's say you've got your title deed, you don't really know your rights, and how many people do, they will go to you, and they will literally say to you, we've got an agreement here, we've got a bit of a problem. And you go, no, that can't be right, I'm going to fight it. But the moment you fight something, you agree that there must be something to fight over. That's why what the banks do, they want you to get an acknowledgement of debt. How many of you guys know that there's an acknowledgement of debt in your home loan agreements? Why do they put an acknowledgement of debt in something which should be a loan agreement? Why do they get you an acknowledgement of debt? But think about it. What's the logic behind it?
Because you're borrowing money, so you've got to acknowledge that you borrowed.
Isn't that a loan agreement?
Sure.
It's in it. A separate acknowledgement of debt exists. It's in the loan agreement. Theoretically, a loan agreement, we're lending you this, the money's going to you here, you're going to pay us back X. Oh, by the way, won't you also sign an acknowledgement of debt? You've got to start asking logical, simple questions.
Complicating matters yourself.
Maybe I'm complicating them, but I can tell you this. We are staring down the barrel of a derivatives market that's causing absolute chaos worldwide. Maybe we've got to start asking some of these simple, stupid questions.
So why were we spared in 2008?
That's what, South Africa?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Plugging the hole in the bottom.
Yeah, that's a long story. I don't want to get into too much, and the guys want to have a bit of a break. Just one question at the back there.
So anybody that doesn't believe that the bank or the courts comes back with a so what answer, we should look at that like research from the constitutional court, take the Reserve Bank and Standard Bank's report. And his readings of what he handed in were thousands of pages, 1,000-page long, and the bank normally on that kind of judgment has to come back with reasons. And it was a two-line judgment. It was an arrogant statement from the courts and the banks itself. And that's what they are. They are banksters. There is no answer. You can take it on any level, up to constitutional courts. And the more attention that's drawn to the issue like this, because as normal citizens, we just think, well, that's logical, and if we ask that question, that has to happen. But the reason for this kind of gathering is this is not what's happening. They are being so blatant and arrogant about it in the way that they're answering us as citizens, that they believe that we are so sold into the slave mentality that we just won't ask the right questions. So the more of us that get louder about asking these questions, and that's why it's so good to have people like Scott and addressing these kind of things and drawing our attention to it, because this is happening. This is being taken to constitutional court level, So and this is how it's come back.
Yeah. Look again, and the agreement, and you make a very good point. I mean, there's a certain logic behind what's going on, and if you look at it in its simplicity, it looks like the system works. That's what we've all built to believe in, and how it works. But I want to give you a little, maybe a little bit of a story. I want you to imagine that everyone here, we get washed up on a desert island. Okay? So we're crawling, we're thirsty, and we don't have anything to drink, and we start starving. And there's no food, except there's a group of cannibals that live on this island. And the cannibals are watching us and going, that looks very nice. We can certainly do something here. So they come along to us and they said, well, why don't you guys just eat each other? And we go, no, never, ever, ever would I. No, it's just not the kind of people we are. So what the cannibals then say is they say, well, I tell you what. Why don't you all cut off an arm and a leg, give it to us, and we'll give you chicken in return. And you guys go, but you start to get hungrier and hungrier, and you realize you don't have a choice. So eventually, everybody cuts off an arm and a leg, gives it to the cannibals. And the cannibals give us little bits of little legs, little chicken legs, things happening, little strips of meat. So we eat them and everything, basically survive. Except then we discover that the word chicken does not mean chicken how we see it. In the cannibals' language, the word chicken means stupid people washed up on a desert island. They basically took our flesh and blood, excuse it for being so direct here, took our flesh and blood, kept most of it for themselves, and then feed it back to us. It's financial cannibalism. Because the people that buy these securities are pension funds and city councils and all these guys who on these, they're the ones who are buying it. We are actually investing in our own demise, with the banks taking a huge cut for themselves. And that's why we're in this huge financial crisis, guys. It's a serious, serious problem. And remember, they'll just follow the number one rule. The number one rule is maintain confidence at all costs. That's what they're there to do. Go back to sleep. That's what is happening. Nothing's wrong, let's say. Nothing's wrong at all. Look at the price increases. Come on, man. We can't carry on not looking at what's going on. It's financial cannibalism. Pure and simple. On that note, shall we have a break? Get something to eat? Can I just get a time quickly so we can just work out? Putting their hands up, which is great. Excellent. Good. Well, get ready for ride number 2. Deborah, just say when. Judy?
You ready?
Ready to go. Okay. Here we go.
The crisis of credit. Visualized. What is the credit crisis? It's a worldwide financial fiasco involving terms you've probably heard, like subprime mortgages, collateralized debt obligations, frozen credit markets, and credit default swaps. Who's affected? Everyone. How did it happen? Here's how. The credit crisis brings two groups of people together, homeowners and investors. Homeowners represent their mortgages, and investors represent their money. These mortgages represent houses, and this money represents large institutions like pension funds, insurance companies, sovereign funds, mutual funds, etc. These groups are brought together through the financial system, a bunch of banks and brokers commonly known as Wall Street. While it may not seem like it, these banks on Wall Street are closely connected to these houses on Main Street. To understand how, let's start at the beginning. Years ago, the investors are sitting on their pile of money, looking for a good investment to turn into more money. Traditionally, they go to the U.S. Federal Reserve, where they buy treasury bills, believed to be the safest investment. But in the wake of the dot-com bust in September 11th, Federal Reserve Chairman Alan Greenspan lowers interest rates to only 1% to keep the economy strong. 1% is a very low return on investment, so the investors say, no thanks. On the flip side, this means banks on Wall Street can borrow from the Fed for only 1%. Add to that general surpluses from Japan, China, and the Middle East, and there's an abundance of cheap credit. This makes borrowing money easy for banks and causes them to go crazy with leverage. Leverage is borrowing money to amplify the outcome of a deal. Here's how it works. In a normal deal, someone with $10,000 buys a box for $10,000. He then sells it to someone else for $11,000. For a $1,000 profit, a good deal. But using leverage, someone with $10,000 would go borrow $990,000 more dollars, giving him $1 million in hand. Then he goes and buys 100 boxes with his $1 million and sells them to someone else for $1,100,000. Then he pays back his $990,000 plus $10,000 in interest. And after his initial $10,000, he's left with a $90,000 profit versus the other guy's $1,000. Leverage turns good deals into great deals. This is a major way banks make their money. So Wall Street takes out a ton of credit, makes great deals, and grows tremendously rich, and then pays it back. The investors see this and want a piece of the action, and this gives Wall Street an idea. They can connect the investors to the homeowners through mortgages. Here's how it works. A family wants a house. so they save for a down payment and contact a mortgage broker. The mortgage broker connects the family to a lender who gives them a mortgage. The broker makes a nice commission. The family buys a house and becomes homeowners. This is great for them because housing prices have been rising practically forever. Everything works out nicely. One day, the lender gets a call from an investment banker who wants to buy the mortgage. The lender sells it to him for a very nice fee. The investment banker then borrows millions of dollars and buys thousands more mortgages and puts them into a nice little box. This means that every month he gets the payments from the homeowners of all the mortgages in the box. Then he sicks his banker wizards on it to work their financial magic, which is basically cutting it into 3 slices: safe, okay, and risky. They pack the slices back up in the box and call it a collateralized debt obligation, or CDO. A CDO works like 3 cascading trays. As money comes in, the top tray fills first, then spills over into the middle, and whatever is left into the bottom. The money comes from homeowners paying off their mortgages. If some owners don't pay and default on their mortgage, less money comes in, and the bottom tray may not get filled. This makes the bottom tray riskier, and the top tray safer. To compensate for the higher risk, the bottom tray receives a higher rate of return, while the top receives a lower, but still nice return. To make the top even safer, banks will insure it for a small fee called a credit default swap. The banks do all of this work so that credit rating agencies will stamp the top slice as a safe AAA rated investment, the highest, safest rating there is. The OK slice is BBB, still pretty good, and they don't bother to rate the risky slice. Because of the AAA rating, the investment banker can sell the safe slice to the investors who only want safe investments. He sells the OK slice to other bankers, and the risky slices to hedge funds and other risk takers. The investment banker makes millions. He then repays his loans. Finally, the investors have found a good investment for their money, much better than the 1% treasury bills. They're so pleased they want more CDO slices. So the investment banker calls up the lender, wanting more mortgages. The lender calls up the broker for more homeowners, but the broker can't find anyone. Everyone that qualifies for a mortgage already has one, but they have an idea. When homeowners default on their mortgage, the lender gets the house, and houses are always increasing in value. Since they're covered if the homeowners default, lenders can start adding risk to new mortgages, not requiring down payments, no proof of income, no documents at all. And that's exactly what they did. So instead of lending to responsible homeowners, called prime mortgages, they started to get some that were, well, less responsible. These are subprime mortgages. This is the turning point.
The securitization process works because he explains it really nicely. But what I like about it is you see how he bundled you guys, which is you, because this happens in this country as well, into the 3 little slices. AAA credit, B rated, risky, etc., etc. Now, what they did in America, and who knows where they did it here, wouldn't surprise me. Again, it's so secretive. But they're called CDOs, collateralized debt obligations. So, what they would do is they would take a whole bunch of debt and they take them to the rating agencies, and they say, right, these guys are the A rating, these guys are the B rating, these are the C rating. Now, what they do is they're going to go and sell those off. But now, what would happen was you would get a number of, let's say, B ratings who they couldn't sell. So they take a whole bunch of B ratings and they take them back to the rating agency. And they say, will you please rate these B ratings? And the rating agency goes, cool, here are your A ratings, here are your B ratings, and here are your C ratings. They're called CDO squared. So now they're selling B ratings off at A ratings investments. And then you even get CDOs cubed, which is when they did it again. This starts to understand what's actually going on behind the scenes. Now, the other thing that's important to realize is we talked about the housing issue. Have you ever noticed why are banks so, they just give money for houses, houses, houses? What about small businesses and, you know, alternative technologies and alternative energy systems and stuff like that? They do some investment in alternative stuff, but it's usually very, very high-end stuff for huge amounts of money. There are so many amazingly brilliant practical solutions, which I want to go through in the second session after lunch. But in the meantime, we've got to start asking these questions. Is our money system is not geared towards sustainability. It's geared towards greed. And that's what's essentially happening at the moment. We're up to point 6 now. Banks refuse to disclose the securitization process to the customer, who has a lawful right to this information. When a customer asks for disclosure, the banks do not even bother responding, or respond using unintelligible legal jargon. Who's had that? Yeah. The stuff they get back with you is just, it's not even English. The entire securitization process is kept tightly secret, while it provides huge profits for those behind the scenes. Now, I introduced you earlier to Mr. Blackbeard. We asked a whole lot of questions to the Reserve Bank. We did this process. And this is the kind of thing that he says. Matters that come to attention in the performance of our duties or in the exercise of our functions, such as details of securitization schemes, are confidential, and in accordance with the provisions of Section 33 of the Reserve Bank Act, may not be communicated to unauthorized third parties such as yourself. We're a duly registered non-profit organization, now with about 80,000 supporters, so we don't crack the nod. As a result of the provisions of Section 33 of the Reserve Bank Act, our office is unable to provide you with such information requested. Next point. As a result of the provisions of Section 33 of the Reserve Bank Act, this office is unable to provide you with details of information requested. Section 33 of the Reserve Bank Act, they don't have to tell anybody anything. So, how do we find out this information? It's a good question. My only opinion is we just need lots of people asking. When we get enough people asking, things will start to change. Also, we're now obviously doing our court battles. This entire process is kept tightly secret while it provides huge profits to those behind the scenes. Instead of securitization providing a benefit to the customer by way of cheaper credit, the reverse occurs. Remember, a lot of people will argue, and it's a fair comment, that securitization is not a bad thing. Because if you could get a loan that wasn't so strict on your foreclosures, that was insured in case of a default, if interest rates were really low, there wasn't so much profiteering behind the scenes, it could theoretically be a good thing. That's assuming, of course, you into the whole money thing in the first place, but let's assume that we still need money to carry on with. So instead of being a benefit, the reverse occurs. Banks are swiftly and relentlessly foreclosing on assets in order to satisfy the needs of investors. There was a document, a recent newspaper article, where a banker says, it actually hurts us to foreclose a property. It hurts the bank. Because we want to get a higher amount for it. That's just, we've got to start looking at what these guys are saying. Again, it hurts the bank. It hurts the bank. Really, I mean, if they just disclosed what we were doing, maybe we would find a solution that fits everybody. It should be mentioned that banks have been known to securitize the same debt several times. To make matters worse, should a person default in the repayment, those secret investors are protected by an insurance policy, while the poor customer enjoys no such protection. So, at the end of the day, I think we're looking at a bit of trouble coming down the line. Okay, the first thing that's going to happen is we're going to start getting more defaults. And people are going to start defaulting. I find the word default interesting, because I was understanding that the word D in front of a word actually meant the opposite. So, you know what I'm saying? If you default, you're actually doing the opposite. You're actually doing the right thing. You're not faulting, you're defaulting. You're undoing the mistake you made before, which was paying off a debt which never existed. That's just an aside. So you start looking at these kind of words, but they are. Look at the word security, for example. Go and ask the majority of South Africans what security means. That doesn't mean the same thing for a bank. Bankers don't use the word security like we do. When they say this call is being recorded for your security, what does that actually mean? They want to make sure you're there on the other side, continuing to oblige. Your security is your labor in the market to earn revenue to basically keep this whole machine going. And if confidence begins to fall in the machine, things start to go wrong. And where's a lot of the money being put? Into housing, which means houses have to keep increasing in prices. I can't believe that prices are still maintaining their value in this country. with what's going on internationally. It's extraordinary. It's just bizarre. Once house prices start going down, if they do start going down, that's when the problem occurs. And that's why America's in huge trouble. Because housing prices go down, all that leverage we talked about earlier. Because remember, people are borrowing money to invest in derivatives, and then they borrow more money to invest in more derivatives, and they use the profits. It just keeps cycling. So we're in this permanent spiral, and it's really, really frightening stuff. Just to finish off on securitization, I'm just going to finish off this little video.
Is the turning point. So, just like always, the mortgage broker connects the family with a lender and a mortgage, making his commission. The family buys a big house. The lender sells the mortgage to the investment banker, who turns it into a CDO and sells slices to the investors and others. This actually works out nicely for everyone. It makes them all rich. No one was worried because as soon as they sold the mortgage to the next guy, it was his problem. If the homeowners were to default, they didn't care. They were selling off their risk to the next guy and making millions, like playing hot potato with a time bomb. Not surprisingly, the homeowners default on their mortgage, which at this moment is owned by the banker. This means he forecloses and one of his monthly payments turns into a house. No big deal. He puts it up for sale. But more and more of his monthly payments turn into houses. Now there are so many houses for sale on the market, creating more supply than there is demand, and housing prices aren't rising anymore. In fact, they plummet. This creates an interesting problem for homeowners still paying their mortgages. As all the houses in their neighborhood go up for sale, the value of their house goes down, and they start to wonder why they're paying back their $300,000 mortgage when the house is now worth only $90,000. They decide that it doesn't make sense to continue paying, even though they can afford to, and they walk away from their house. Default rates sweep the country, and prices plummet. Now the investment banker is basically holding a box full of worthless houses. He calls up his buddy, the investor, to sell his CDO, but the investor isn't stupid and says, no thanks. He knows that the stream of money isn't even a dribble anymore. The banker tries to sell to everyone, but nobody wants to buy his bomb. He's freaking out because he borrowed millions, sometimes billions of dollars to buy this bomb, and he can't pay it back. Whatever he tries, he can't get rid of it. But he's not the only one. The investors have already bought thousands of these bombs. The lender calls up trying to sell his mortgage, but the banker won't buy it, and the broker is out of work. The whole financial system is frozen, and things get dark. Everybody starts going bankrupt. But that's not all. The investor calls up the homeowner and tells him that his investments are worthless. And you can begin to see how the crisis flows in a cycle. Welcome to the crisis of credit.
Absolutely.
It's really nice because it starts to show you how the contagion effect and how everything's connected with regards to the system. Now, you notice that these investors. Now, remember, in some ways, we could be investors because our pension funds, etc., and our certain investments are being used to invest in these markets. So if it goes bang, we're in a bit of trouble. But remember, just because you haven't specifically got money invested in a derivative or anything like that, doesn't mean that because of the leverage that's going on, doesn't mean that you're not going to be affected by it. For example, the fact that Greece has only got a couple of million people in it, if you take leverage into consideration, their entire market exposure, if it was to collapse, would probably be in the region of a significant percentage of the GDP of the planet. So, a small crisis, this is important to realize. If you stop paying your small amount of money every month, it has a much bigger effect in the overall market than what you think, which means someone else has to now run around and get credit to go and plug that gap. You know, what is it, the Dutch kid with putting the fingers in the dike to stop the dam from busting? And this is kind of in the process of what's happened. Now, has anyone also ever noticed that it's become very difficult to get money out from overseas if you've got investment money locked in? And a lot of the times we blame the incompetency of the banks because they just don't give it out, because they want all the stuff. If you want to take money out from a UK bank, or you're based here, you've got investments, you've got to sign these documents, but you can't post them or fax them. You've got to literally go there and have somebody drop them off, or it's a whole complicated process. Also, with regard to retirement annuities, etc., you can't no longer take the whole lot out. You've got to only take a portion out. You've got to keep the rest reinvesting. This is starting to take place, and people go, oh, no, it's just the safety in this, and it's just protect yourselves, because otherwise you'll go and spend all your retirement money. Is it really? They want to keep this money cycling, because now that we're starting to learn what money's about, we know that there's a lot more going on than what meets the eye. Just to finish off, I just want to go on this again. It's point 7. We have written confirmation from the South African Reserve Bank that once a bank sells a loan into a securitization pool, they lose the legal right to that asset. This could mean that literally tens, if not hundreds of thousands of homes and other assets will be taken away legally from South Africans, which is just what they did in America. Remember the confidence? The media always tries to give confidence. You'll often hear, securitization's not that big in South Africa. It's not like in America. It's done differently here. Please don't fall for any of that stuff. Until we see exactly what